The cardiovascular system is a system that moves nutrients, gases, and waste to and from cells, and it helps the body stabilize temperature and pH, all in an effort to maintain body homeostasis. We also have the musculoskeletal system, which is a system of bones and joints, muscles, and tendons. The gastrointestinal system, which takes in food, digests it to extract energy and nutrients, and expels the remaining waste. The gut, many of us may not know this, is a very important part of the immune system. And finally, the immune system, the defense system, which helps it's a defense system, and it also is a system that helps maintain body homeostasis. So this is what those systems look like in the visible human. And in fact, in the CFS human, each one of those systems has been shown to have some type of difference or problem in people with CFS. As I mentioned before, where's my mouse? Here we go. The epidemiologic studies, or the case definition studies, has helped us identify a number of risk factors, that is, things that make it more likely or possible for a certain individual to get sick with CFS. And these include things such as certain types of infections, or genetic makeup, or environmental influences, in addition to combining these things, gene-environment interactions, to make certain individuals more at risk for CFS. And we also have a number of interactions that are occurring between the immune system and the nervous system and our endocrine system that then modulate a number of our systemic effects, whether it be our cardiovascular system or our gut or our musculoskeletal system, to basically end up or result in a CFS pathology. Now, what hasn't been quite figured out yet is whether or not when we look at the end result, whether or not when we look at a picture like this, whether we're looking at the end result of CFS pathology or a number of intermediate steps. In other words, is it true that everyone that has CFS has each one of these systems going wrong, or is it more likely that individual things are happening, are different in people with CFS than in controls? The bottom line, I guess, that should be taken away from this picture is that over the 20 years of research, we have actually been able to construct a diagram that really does describe some of the differences, some of the pathology of CFS. Let's try to zoom in on each one of these systems now.
Let me take 1 second to launch another poll, and apologize for the typo there in the question, but let us know how the pace of the presentation is so we can gauge. Suzanne's getting into some of the more complex slides, and we just want to make sure that we are progressing at the correct pace for the group.
Wow, quite a bit too slow. Ramp it up.
You all can see where your colleagues are, so we will maybe go a tad faster, but not too much faster.
A tad faster. Okay, let's take a look at the central nervous system and what's going on in CFS. This top graph is from a study that actually correlated a mental fatigue score, which came from the multidimensional fatigue inventory, with some computerized testing. You can see here on the x-axis, this is the CFS score versus the non-fatigue score. And what this showed is a strong correlation with mental fatigue by the questionnaire and objective measures of working memory and sustained attention vigilance. In other words, people with CFS that had a high mental fatigue score also had problems or objective differences in working memory and attention using a computerized test. And this work was published by Dr. Caparone in proposed psychopharmacology a couple years back. And clearly quite different from people with non-fatigue. This has implications for cognitive ability in the central nervous system. More recently, there was a very interesting study by Caceres from Spain in collaboration with some people from the UK, where they used functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, to look at the functional brain response during a fatigue-provoking procedure in both CFS patients, over here on the top, and in controls. And what they found, if you look at these areas, let me just walk you through this a little bit. These areas that are highlighted actually are a measure of blood oxygen response. This is what the magnet, the imaging machine, is able to detect. So what you see here, for example, in the CFS picture, is this part of the brain lit up, and in controls, this part of the brain lit up. And up here on the upper left, here in CFS, and the opposite side basically in controls. This is not, even though it looks like one brain, this is actually a composite picture of all the responses from the CFS versus the controls. And the result from this, the conclusion, is that increased activation of specific brain regions were different from the controls when people underwent the exact same fatigue-provoking procedure. Now, the exact meaning of this, other than that there is a different brain response, different brain regions are responding, is not quite clear yet, although it does implicate that maybe some of the wiring differences, some neurological rewiring has occurred. And that would make sense looking at this top figure where we have differences in working memory, and then the bottom figure actually showing differences in response to fatigue. We also have now demonstrated differences in the endocrine system, and just as a reminder, the endocrine system is really thought of as the broadcasting system because it sends out chemical messengers into the blood, and these chemicals reach the entire body. One of the most thoroughly studied systems, endocrine systems in CFS, is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And this is one of the major endocrine systems that controls our reactions to stress and regulates various body processes, including digestion, the immune response, mood, sexuality, and energy usage. So it has been, actually, HPA axis has been suspected in CFS for quite some time. And there has been quite a bit of information published on this system to show that it is indeed different in people with CFS. On this next slide, I've put a picture which shows you how the HPA axis system really works. So H for the hypothalamus sits right here, kind of in the middle of your head. It releases a factor that then stimulates the pituitary, which then releases ACTH through the blood, which then